Hello, welcome, good day, welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to Uncensored _ the truth about money. Thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it. So today we're talking about debt, but the legal route, prescribed debt. I remember we've had this conversation before, you and I. And we just realized that there are certain things that might need an attorney or someone who knows more about the legal matters. And that's why we decided to get Sis Ruth Vandaag just to help us and to get this through.
Because we always brush.
Yeah, we're
brush the
always
surface,
like
man.
we just touch the side because we're not legal people.
People are like, yeah, you said on your channel that this, that. Now I'm in trouble. So we're like, okay, let's get the right people.
Yeah, which is, you see, we love our viewers, man. We really love our viewers. We don't just do things for the sake of doing things, but we do things with one quality, quality information. So we'll jump on the call right now. So unfortunately, she could not be here in studio, because of logistic issues. But we'll jump on the call with her. Hopefully the call is clear. Everyone can hear her. And
she's not in Dubai.
We'll never know.
You never know.
Everyone is going to Dubai.
People are international now.
International. Plus now we the Emirates are part of the BRICS. Part of BRICS now. So we are one big family. Let me try and give her a call. And let's get rolling. Let's hear. I hope I don't irritate her because I've been calling her all morning just to make sure. She said 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes.
Stick to time.
But 5 minutes for black people is what?
I add another 10 minutes there.
So 15. Sorry.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly. Tammy, can you hear?
Yeah, loud and clear.
So it's myself and Tammy in studio.
Perfect. Good morning, Tammy.
Good morning, Sis Ruth. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. You?
I'm great, thank you. This is not too early, ne?
No, this is fine.
You've had your cup of coffee.
Actually, my morning started at 5 a.m.
All right. Are you part of the 5 a.m. club?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a club worth being part of.
So, Sis Ruth, I think I would do you an injustice if I were to introduce you. Do you mind just maybe just introducing yourself to our viewers out there, who you are, what you do, and then we'll take it from there.
All right. My name is Ruth Makambeni. I am an attorney by profession. How far do you want me to go into my bio?
You have 1 minute to shine.
Sure. Okay. I'm a practicing attorney. My background is in I've done a bit of everything. When I first went into practice and I was a training attorney, I worked for the University of Pretoria Law Clinic, where we dealt a lot with, and it was at a time when the new National Credit Act came into operation. So we got training on how that works, how debt review works, and I think I was there for about 7 months, and then my contract was ceded over to a law firm in Sandton, where I got experience in corporate law, company law, contracts, transactions, procurement practices, corporate governance, and all of that. So I'm pretty much, I've got experience in a wide field of law, but my study speciality, I did my master's in law, my LLM on international law, and I wrote a thesis on international trade law. So suffice it to say, where there's money concerned in transactions, that's where more or less my forte is. So I guess maybe that's where my relevance is in today's topic.
Yeah. So you are basically the perfect person for today's topic. Pratamza and I tried to shed a little light on this topic, but we're just really just scraping the surface, and and when we had you speak at I think the Women's Fellowship event, and we were like, oh, then a light bulb came. We had a light bulb moment, like we definitely have to get you on the show. So the topic that we're talking about today, what we're talking about today is prescribed debt. So we're just trying to really just understand what is prescribed debt.
All right. Just to give you a background or a bit of information on what prescribed debt is, let's first get an understanding on what prescription means.
Okay.
So basically, when we say prescription in terms of law, we're talking about a situation where after a certain particular time, you are unable to enforce your rights in terms of collecting a debt as a creditor.
Okay.
How this translates to the debtor, meaning that if I'm the one who owes the person or the company, it then means that whoever I owe money to will not be able to enforce or go to court and seek legal relief for the debt that I owe them or the money that I owe them. All right. And prescription doesn't just apply to debts. It also applies to claims that you might have. Let's say somebody has bumped into your car, or somebody has stolen something from you, or somebody has defrauded you on something. Then you have a certain period of time within which to bring out a summons or to sue the person for your damages. So that's basically what prescription means. The time which you have to institute legal action against someone for something that they've incurred, damages they've incurred, or a debt that they might owe. So when we're talking about debt in particular, we're talking about the time within which that a creditor must collect that debt from you. Basically, morally. Now, I'm using the term creditor because it's a bit broad. It doesn't just talk about when you owe somebody by virtue of, let's say, a loan or a credit facility that you may have taken out at the bank. A creditor can also be somebody that you end up owing money as a result of a court order. Okay. So that's why I'm using the term creditor, because it covers a wide range of things. And I'm going in terms, I'm particularly introducing the part of court orders because as and when we have the discussion, you'll see where the relevance comes in. So basically, a prescribed debt would be a debt that you can no longer enforce because the time within which for you to collect on it has passed. Yeah.
And then what's the time period then?
All right. For a normal debt, right? Let's say a loan. Let's say you've taken a loan out from the bank and then you fall into arrears. And in terms of your loan agreement, they say that they cancel. Your loan becomes fully payable. Let's say you've taken out 5,000 rand, you've only paid 2,500, and they send you letters of demand trying to collect on it, and you're not paying it. And basically, from the time that you default up until the time that the debt then prescribes, the bank or your loan, your microlender then has 3 years to enforce the debt. That means that from the time that you default up until the time that they issue summons against you, they have that bank or that microlender has 3 years within which to issue summons to collect on that money that you owe them. So, that's how it would play out in a scenario of where there's money exchanging hands between a lender or a microlender or a bank. How that then plays out is that in terms of, and the prescription of debt is actually regulated in terms of the Prescription Act. I'll give you the years first now. And basically the Act it stipulates that you have from the time that the debt becomes due and payable up until the time that you collect or issue summons on it, that the creditor has 3 years within which to collect that money. And by the term, when we say issue summons, it's not just about getting the summons issued by the court. The person must actually be served with the summons for prescription to be disturbed. That period of prescription to be interrupted for it not to lapse. And basically, once that period has lapsed, then you lose the enforceability, the right to enforce the debt that you may have had in terms of law and in terms of the Prescription Act. Yeah.
So this mainly falls on creditors. So should the creditors not come for you or come after you for the period of 3 years, then you are not liable to paying that debt.
Look, some creditors get inventive in that prescription can also be interrupted through other ways. Let's say it's 4 years after the time that you had taken out this loan, or after which the whatever debt you owe became payable, right? Let's say it's 4 years afterwards, and the creditor comes to you and they say, "Hey, I want my money back." The minute you acknowledge your indebtedness to that person, you've interrupted prescription. Basically, that period of prescription starts running again from that time that you actually acknowledge that, yes, I know I owe you. It can take something as basic as you receiving a call from a call agent or collections agent, call center agent or collections agent, and they say to you, "Listen, we see that you've got a Truworths account that is still that you're still owing 2,500 rand on it." And you find that they're phoning you 4 years after the time that you started owing that money. And you say, "Oh yes, I know about that debt." By saying that, you've literally just acknowledged your indebtedness to Truworths and you've cancelled prescription. And in this day and age, we know that these most of these calls are recorded, so they can actually do a transcription of that call and say that you've acknowledged the debt as at the 26th of August, the debt from Truworths from this year. So now we're going to issue letter of demand based on that call, and now they're issuing summons against you because you've acknowledged your indebtedness. So basically, you acknowledging the exception to the rule that prescription runs for 3 years from the time that the debt was due is then interrupted. The exception to the rule is that if I acknowledge my indebtedness, whether verbally or by signing an acknowledgement of debt, then I've interrupted prescription, then it kicks in. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't become enforceable or that the debtor can come after you for that debt after 4 years. It all depends on how you then respond, whether you acknowledge the debt or you raise prescription as a defense that, no, hang on, wait, you guys had 3 years, you didn't come after me, please. You know, it's one of two ways.
So now what happens in an instance where you have maybe altered your contact details, or maybe you have moved the locations and they can't literally get hold of you? Let's say for example, just for the sake of an example, they can't get a hold of you for 3 years, and then just miraculously after 3 years, then they are now able to get hold of you, and you just deny the debt. Like, listen, I don't know anything about this. You know, what sort of rights does the creditor have against such a person?
Look, the creditor still doesn't have much right in terms of enforcing the debt in such an instance, because it's incumbent on them to have traced you before that period of prescription lapses, you know. And if they didn't do that, then it really isn't the creditor's, the debtor's fault. And in this day and age of private investigators and tracing agents, and everybody more or less lives on the internet and online. It's very easy to trace a person. It's not as difficult as it used to be to trace a person. You just need to go to the right tracing agent, give them whatever information you have, and they will see where and how they trace a person, whether they trace you through your recorded SIM card or whatever the situation might be. Yeah, and the whole them now miraculously after 3 years being able to trace you, it just simply means that they weren't trying hard enough to trace you beforehand. Yeah.
So
it still doesn't make it. It doesn't change the fact that 3 years started running. That 3 year period started running from the time that debt became due and payable. Whether it was caused, it being due and payable being caused either by default on a repayment arrangement or whatever the situation might be.
No, I completely hear you. And then, what loans cannot be prescribed? What loans cannot prescribe?
Let me just think carefully. I know, for instance, there are certain. I'm sure if you can recall, I had said that prescription works on a running of a particular period. So basically, what that means is that different kind of debt have different types of periods within which to prescribe.
Okay.
The general rule is that a debt will prescribe after 3 years. However, if there is an order, a court order against you for a debt, then the judgment creditor has 5 years to enforce that order, right? If you've got a home loan, right, and let's say you default on the home loan, right, then the you defaulting on that home loan and the banking institution or the financing institution then coming after you, then it means that bank loan would have a period of about 30 years before it prescribes from the time that you defaulted, right?
Yes.
So you see how the different periods then apply to the different things. And let me give you a scenario where you default on your home loan, right?
Yes.
And your bank then comes after you and they foreclose the house and they sell it all and they attach it through court orders and everything, right? Yes. And then they decide to sell it at an auction, right? So now you've got that judgment of the home loan being cancelled and the home being repossessed from you, against you, listed against you, right? Now the court then, the home loan institution then has whatever period that they've got to enforce that order, whether it be they want you to to be evicted from the property so they can sell it on, and sometimes they even sell it on to the next person without you being evicted, and they just declare on the auction documentation that there's occupants on the property, whether illegal or by arrangement or whatever the situation might be, right? Am I making sense in there, or do I need to clarify even more?
No, you do make a lot of sense. And then my next question is, so what?
And then, yeah.
No, sorry, you can go ahead.
And then I had covered the general rule for 3 years, what the rule is in terms of court orders and home loans, right?
Yeah.
And then there are certain government bodies through legislation, like for instance, your municipality, your receiver of revenue, meaning your tax authority, SAR, and your TV licenses. You see those three, how do I put them? The three gates that might occur with those three different institutions are regulated in terms of law, and they then fall as part of the exceptions to the 3 year rule. And there would be different periods of prescription applicable to those different types of debts that might arise. For instance, your TV license, right? Your TV license, that date doesn't prescribe.
Okay.
The TV license authority can come through to you well, it doesn't prescribe within the 3-year period, the normal 3-year period. They can claim TV licenses that have been unpaid for up to 30 years that you haven't paid them. So there's also something you need to, take into consideration.
Yeah.
So and I know of people who've gotten blacklisted because of a TV license that wasn't paid.
Yeah.
But there are, and luckily with TV licenses, there's usually drives and periods that come around where they'll say that if you've got overdue TV license dues, this is the time for indemnity or whatever, and they'll reduce whatever debt you have. Let's say they might reduce it by 90% and you end up only paying 10%, depending on whatever drive the SABC decides to run at whatever period of time. But those are the things that people would just need to be on the lookout for through the different media platforms and social media platforms. And then things like a debt that you might owe to SARS, right, which is a receiver of revenue. SARS has the legislative authority, meaning there's an act which empowers SARS that they can actually go to court and decide to attach money from whether it's your business bank account or your personal account, wherever your income is going to be paid into, to recover whatever you owe SARS in terms of your taxes. And people usually find out that the SARS has actually gotten a court order when the salary is supposed to be paid out, and instead of getting paid 45,000, they're getting 2,000 rand.
Yeah.
And they go to HR, they're like, hang on, wait, what's happening? And they're like, oh yes, your salary came through and we noticed there's a SARS notification on your salary, and this is how much SARS has attached from your salary.
Just with that,
which is why,
just with that, like a quick one. So you just mentioned SARS now. Do creditors have the right to gain access to your bank account, or is it only like bodies like SARS?
Basically, any creditor would have access to your bank account or attach money from your bank account only if they've got a court order and they've got a written of execution from the court that gave them the order for the debt against you. And that writ of execution specifically authorizes the sheriff to go to whichever banking institution that you bank with and instruct the bank to debit whatever amount from your bank account. And then sometimes you get certain court orders, not court orders, but writs of execution where the judgment creditor asks the court to attach money from your salary before it hits your bank account. So in such a situation, the writ of execution will then be delivered to your employer. And your employer will usually inform the person that, listen, the sheriff has come with a writ of execution that you owe such and such a person so much money. And in terms of this court order, we are now instructed to deduct, let's say you owe the person 70,000 rand. We are instructed to deduct 35,000 rand in 2 installments to pay off the 70,000 rand that you owe, which will be whatever capital amount that you owe plus whatever legal costs that may be attached, including sheriff's fees. So the only other time that a creditor has the right to or access to your bank account or to your salary would be in terms of a court order that is then a writ of execution that is then backed up by a court order where judgment was granted against you.
And then just earlier on, you mentioned you mentioned the word blacklisting. So are there other consequences as far as prescribed debt is concerned? Does this have a negative effect on your credit score or any other consequences?
All right. Let me quickly just go into the different categories of what. Well, let me not call it blacklisting because now the new legislation is trying to move away from that, using that term. They call it adverse listing against your credit profile, basically.
Okay.
So there's different categories, right, that you can fall into.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the situation of that account, the Truworths account, right?
Yeah.
The minute you start defaulting on your monthly installments, Truworths, from the minute, like let's say it's day number 41 of you having defaulted from your Truworths account, right? Truworths can already inform any of the credit bureaus that you are in default, you're not a regular payer, right? Mm-hmm. And they will note it as such on your credit profile. Not that you have judgment or anything, but that you are late or you're in arrears on the credit account. Then that's a category listing against you, right? Mm. And the minute your account is then brought up to date, then Truworths needs to update that listing. Now, let's say your account is not brought up to date and it goes to the extent of letters of demand having been issued, a final letter of demand for payment, right? Mm. Then Truworths can go back to the credit bureau and say that not only are you in arrears, there's a final letter of demand issued and your debt has been referred for collection, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a different category in your credit listing. Mm-hmm. It goes on further, Truworths issues summons against you, right? Mm-hmm. And let's say they issue summons against you within that 3-year period. It comes up, then they go back to, they can still go back to the credit bureau and say that debt has now advanced to the point where we've issued summons. If they take judgment, then the judgment is listed because the courts have a system where they go into the ITC records and they can update that there's a judgment listing against you. Each court has that system available to it, and they usually do it from the court side, right?
Okay.
Now, every single one of those listings that you have against you, if it's not corrected, it can literally stay on your profile up to 3 years.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, but if you have a judgment listing against you, right? A judgment listing, depending on what kind of debt it is, can stay on your profile for between 3 and 5 years. If that debt is not paid up or after the judgment, and even if you have a listing against you, the easiest way to get it off your record before whatever period prescribes is to pay up the debt and to inform ITC that you've paid up the debt, and then they correct the profile or the listings against you accordingly.
So just a question based on that, paying up your debt, right? So obviously there's a lot of myths and sayings out there, and we are here just to get the truth. One thing I know is that what you should not do when you do have debt, let's say with Truworths and you owe, let's say 10,000 Rand, is not to avoid the calls. And if, let's say, for example, all right, you do get the courage to answer the phone and the other person on the other line says, okay, we need to arrange, a payment plan. So they usually give you an amount. Let's say, all right, we need you to pay 500 Rand, every single month. Is it true that you do not have to agree to the terms that they give you or the amount that they give you? You can say, listen, guys, I only afford 100 Rand every single month. And they can actually say, all right, we'll work out a payment structure based on your affordability. Or do we have to honor that minimum amount that they prescribe, that you need to pay on a certain period?
Thank you for that question, because it's actually very important, and it's part and parcel why the National Credit Act was actually promulgated. Because there were a lot of consumers and debtors who were forced into credit arrangements that they actually couldn't afford. So to alleviate that situation and to give the creditors the debtors some sort of protection, the situation is that every single credit provider is required to assess your debt affordability at any given time, right? So let's say you've taken out this Truworths account, like you're saying, and now at the time that you took it out, you could afford certain things and you pay certain installments. Or sometimes you find that things change drastically in your financial situation and you end up not being able to afford certain things. When they do call you to find out when are you paying and this and that and the other thing, take the call and tell them categorically that, listen, I hear that you're saying that my installment is 500 rand, but right now, the way my finances are set up, I cannot afford 500 rand. What I can afford to give you is, let's say, 50 rand or 150 rand. Be upfront about them. About your situation. And say to them that, let me give you 150 for the next 6 months, and after that, let's reassess and reevaluate and see where we are and how much I can afford. Then you've taken out that whole being in a tight situation, and now you're avoiding calls, and you've got anxiety, you've got stress, because now you're managing the situation the best way in terms of what your affordability allows you. And then, just because you've done that payment arrangement doesn't mean they can't then list you on ITC and say that you're on payment arrangements for a debt. That is their prerogative, unfortunately. And those are some of the things, the tools that creditors have at their disposal that they can use to sort of, how do I put this? Manipulate the situation the best way that they can to keep you, almost on the straight and narrow. Because the minute you go anywhere, you want to do anything in terms of getting a credit facility of any sort, and they check your credit profile and you've got this listing of being in arrears and you've got on payment arrangements, that then informs your suitability for further debt with another institution in terms of whether or not you can afford taking on more debt because you're already on payment arrangements with Truworths. And those are the kind of tools that creditors use to assess how viable giving debt to a person is. So yes, it's important to take the calls, but it's also more important to make sure that before you actually take on any debt, you can afford to service. And I'm not saying that instances that will not happen where your situation changes. And when your situation changes, then you need to be upfront about your situation and also have that difficult conversation with yourself to say that, okay, things are tight now. I need to scale back until such time that my finances have improved.
I feel that that just deserves an episode on itself.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of
because now when we go to that aspect of things, when we're talking in terms of things of debt review, debt restructuring, and that's a completely different topic altogether.
And I think it's very important, especially looking at post-COVID, how people have, struggled, in the economy, houses being repossessed, cars being repossessed, and people have question marks on how do I get out of this mess? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
And
what else the alternative would be instead of going into debt review, what else could I do? And all these other things,
Do you have a follow-up question?
I don't know. I'm learning a lot.
So obviously now because of time, but then just a question, right? With what like you and Pratams are talking about, what processes must have been done before a creditor can, for example, let's say, issue you with a court order, or maybe repossessing your goods or anything like that?
All right. Well, basically, in terms of the National Credit Act, right? Somebody who gives you credit must be a registered credit provider. Let's start there.
Okay.
And if they're not a registered credit provider, then they run the risk of that debt being declared null and void, and basically not being able to recover whatever that was advanced to you. That's the first thing. And if they are a registered credit provider, there's a particular notice that they must send you, a letter of demand / notice that they might send you that you are in arrears by so much. And because you're in arrears by so much, they advise you to contact them for a payment arrangement. And if you can't afford a payment arrangement for whatever reason, then they would advise you to go for debt review to have your debts restricted, right? And there's a particular way that this notice must be drafted in terms of what the National Credit Act and the National Credit Regulations require from the creditor, right? And that notice must be referred to in a summons. Let's say the debt is still not paid and there's no debt review application pending or whatever it is. Then that letter, that notice / letter of demand needs to be referred to in the summons, right? And it must be attached in the summons, and there must be proof that you actually received this letter.
Sure.
Whether it's in terms of what a registered mail receipt showing that it was collected from the post office or whatever the situation is, right?
Yeah.
And if they can't prove proper service or delivery of the letter to you, then the summons is premature. Now, a lot of times when people receive summons, they adopt the ostrich attitude of hiding their head in the sand and pretending like the summons didn't come and hoping that it will miraculously go away on it. I don't advise that.
Yeah.
Because then you end up having default judgments taken against you and all of that. And more often than not, you find that these big creditors don't have the time to make sure that all their dots all their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed. And you find that on a technicality, you can defend the summons. Maybe you find that they didn't issue this notice properly, or it was not even issued at all, right? So you can delay the process. I'm not saying you can successfully sidestep it, but you might be able to delay it on a technicality, buying yourself time to actually pay off this debt before a summons is actually properly served on, you know?
Yeah.
But if everything else is done properly, basically it will be that notice / letter of demand, the summons that then comes out, and then either you defend it or you don't defend it, and then there's a court order that comes out, right? Now, usually what happens is, depending on whether or not there was a contract signed with your with your creditor, or whether everything was done online with an account or whatever the situation is, the initial credit agreement is what's going to determine how the rest of the process in terms of collections against you will be handled. Yeah, so it's very important to read everything before you sign anything.
No, I think you've just
because that is another conversation for another day.
I just opened a can of worms. Like, I have so many questions. I don't know if you'd be keen to have you again, maybe next week on a call, just to talk about this, Sis Ruth.
No, we can do that. I'm amenable to it. But it's extremely important to read the fine print of everything that you sign, especially when you're about to open an account, take on a loan, take on a home loan. You know, those fine print, those terms and conditions are really where they're going to get you, and where you end up acknowledging and taking on responsibilities that you never actually intended on taking on as a debtor. So, you know, and then the debt counseling comes in. That notice that I mentioned, that they need to serve you with a notice that refers you for debt counseling or debt review. The debt counseling sessions that I know were offered by most institutions that had law clinics. Like, for instance, the UJ main campus at Kingsway has a law clinic, and I know they offer debt counseling. I'm not too sure about the first law clinic. In Pretoria, I know the University of Pretoria Law Clinic offers debt counseling and debt review. And there's a number of different institutions that you can Google, or you can find from the National Credit Regulators website that gives you the registered and accredited debt counselors that they have on file that you can contact and get debt counseling and debt review is supposed to be a free service.
Yeah.
So you can check on their website and check who is accredited with them to offer it for free. And then you can go to them before your creditors even start calling you and have a session and sit down with the debt counselor and see how best you can get yourself out of a tight situation, and having that interface with your debtors that, listen, this person is undergoing debt counseling. We're in the process of assessment. Please give us about maybe 3-4 weeks or whatever the situation might be, and then we'll contact you about how best they intend on settling your debt. Mm-hmm. That's also something that debtors can go into, especially when you're feeling so overwhelmed with everything. Mm-hmm. And that is a step that you can do before you even apply for debt review. Yeah. And you might find that your situation is actually not that bad. All you needed was somebody with an outside perspective who can show you different avenues of skinning the cat,
Yeah. Well, Sister, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Thank you. We can't wait to have you again on another welcome. Call. Thank you. So we're just going to go now. Thank you so much.
You are most welcome.
Cool. Cheers. Bye.
All right then. Bye.
Bye. Cool. And that was Sis Ruth. How do you feel about Hamza?
I'm sitting here and I'm quiet. And while she's speaking, like, my mind is busy pacing. I'm like, if I had heard this information 10 years ago, man, I'd be in a different, situation right now. Although it's never too late. But, I think we always said that we're also learning here.
Yeah.
More as much as the viewers are also learning. But my man, I think I need to just go home and think.
While you go home, let's also go home. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We truly appreciate it. Don't forget, we are on Instagram as well as TikTok. We go by the name of uncensored _ the truth about money. And please don't forget to subscribe to this video. Until we meet again, cheers.